Welcome to Growing Up in Easton. Today is September 13th, 2023. My name is Priscilla Almquist-Olsen, your host, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing a classmate of mine, the Oliver Ames High School class of 1960, John Stanton Clark. And he's always been Stanton to me, or Stan Clark, but I know that in his life in Connecticut, he goes by John. So you'll have to forgive me, Stanton. I got to call you that. It's too bad. But I want to welcome you to the show, and so good to see you after all these years. And our last time together was at our 50th reunion, and now we're having this week, today and tomorrow, our 63rd reunion. So welcome.
Glad to be here.
Yes.
All of us can be, but I can.
Right. And don't you think that's true of all of us? We're all in, 81, 82, and we're so glad to be here. And probably say a thank you prayer each morning when we wake up and say, oh, I'm still here. And I know that you have a life of purpose, and I think that's one of the reasons that you have lived a long life and will continue to. And so tell us about your early days, though, in Easton, and how it prepared you for your later life.
The early days of my time that I recall in Easton are somewhat skewed now when I come back and see what Easton looks like now. Back when I lived here and I went to school here, graduated, a lot of the houses that I see now all over the town were trees back then. A tremendous amount of growth has taken place. And we had a very nice small town, I thought, when I lived here. And I enjoyed living here and enjoyed coming back.
Right. And what are some of your early memories about being a kid in Easton? Because you grew up in Northeastern, right?
Yes.
So you went to Northeastern Grammar.
That's correct. The grammar school right downtown Northeastern. Miss McFadden was the principal, and she had not that I think I had to sit on her bad place once.
You mean the white bench?
It was called the white bench, and it was the horrible, horrible thing to have to go through. You did something bad enough to go to the white bench. Oh, you're going to get a rattan on your hand, and you're going to be spoken to. You did bad stuff. Shaken. It was not a pleasant experience. That wasn't. But I used to play the tuba. People don't remember that. In a band at the school. And the trumpet. Not very well, but well enough to do it. What I think I probably enjoyed most of all was cycling. And I used to sell greeting cards, go door to door. And as I accumulated the amount of greeting cards and the money and sent it back to the organization I was selling for, I could accumulate points toward prizes. And I earned prizes, swim fins and a mask, a little Bulliver portable radio, and a flying airplane, gasoline-powered airplane around in a circle, and a few other things. So anyway, I used to go door to door selling greeting cards.
My goodness. And we also had adults who went door to door selling their goods. Do you remember Cookie Callahan?
Cookie Callahan was in competition with my father's work. My father worked for the National Biscuit Company, and Cookie Callahan had his own truck that he would ride around in and deliver cookies to various places. But the two of them really were very good friends. But funny you should bring up Cookie Callahan. I'd forgotten that.
Yeah. And he would deliver cookies and crackers not cookies so much. My mother made homemade cookies, but crackers, and I can still see his green. It was a truck that was sort of like a van, and I can still see him pulling up next to our house. And when I got married, I had the reception at the Frothingham Hall, and Cookie Callahan and his band were the entertainment, the dance, and we danced to all of his songs. He was a wonderful musician also. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Nope. Yeah. So, and then we had the milkman. Which milkman did you have?
The band?
No, milkman, a milkman that delivered milk to your house. You don't. We had more dairies in
I'm not recalling.
You don't recall. Well, we had more dairies in Easton, and at the Historical Society, they have one of the glass bottles from all of the dairies in Easton, and they must have at least 25 bottles. And Mr. Gooch was mine, and who was the one that drove for Langwater? I forget. But anyway, we had more farms in Easton, especially on Bay Road. Bay Road was filled with farms, and now it's filled with houses.
I can recall, not very often, but going down Bay Road, actually I was on my bicycle trying to visit a girlfriend of mine in Southeastern. I didn't know where I was going, but I was marking to myself in my brain, where are all the houses? There were no houses on Bay Road back then. It was a long time ago.
Well, when I was 16, my cousin Carolyn Wiedemann, she taught me how to drive, and she said, well, we got to go to Bay Road because there's no traffic, no houses. It's a perfect place for you to learn how to drive. And she had a 1938 coupe with a stick shift that came from the floor. You remember those?
Yes. My dad never had one of those, though.
No, but this was a pretty old car, 1938, and the year was 1958. So it was a 30-year-old car, yeah, at that time. But I certainly learned how to drive standard with that stick shift, they called it. Anyway, so tell me, what are some of your earliest memories when you were biking around? Where did you go?
Most of the time I was riding, I was going someplace with my fishing rod, and I was going fishing. And Langlotto Pond, down on Main Street, I'd ride my bike down there and kind of see if anybody was watching me, and I'd kind of sneak in and go someplace and fish, because you weren't supposed to go on that property. But I used to go fishing there. And
we all walked on the property.
yeah, Shovel Shop Pond, I used to fish there, not very far from here. It's right around the corner. And there was a pond up on Lincoln Street. I think we called it Maliff's Pond.
Yes.
Oh, I'm right. I'm remembering that.
You are. That's very good.
I used to go up there a time. But what I used to do to get there was to go up Main Street, up past the Unitarian Church, which was my church, and go off to the left as if I were going to, what was that? What's that pond up there?
Long Pond.
Long Pond. And a little ways up on the left was a road. You go down the end of the road, and one of our classmates, John Weskovich, lived up there.
Oh.
And I would ride up right up that road. He lived right at the end, and I'd keep on going into the woods on my bike until I got someplace I could hide my bike. And I'd go over to this other Maliff's Pond, and I'd fish there. That was a lot of fun.
So
Matter of fact, used to go swimming there too.
And so did you catch any fish?
Sometimes. They weren't very big fish. They were small bass. But it was fun.
Sure. So did you go by yourself, or did you have friends?
Actually, Lee Miller, remember, a classmate
Yes.
of ours. He lived at the top of
Sheridan.
Stanley Road on Sheridan Street. If you go right up Stanley Road and keep going, go across Sheridan Street, you go right into his house.
exactly.
I lived in a house up there, and he and I used to go places either fishing or swimming.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a good friend of mine too, and we went to church together, and he sadly passed away last year. So,
I had heard that. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that saddened me. He was a nice guy.
Yes, he was. Yeah. And he got nicer with the years too. He was such a gentle fellow. Anyway, um, so tell me, when did you ever go? You must have gone to Frothingham Park a lot. And what kinds of activities did you enjoy there?
Where?
Frothingham Park.
Well, we lived on 14 Day Street, and in a very long rectangular lot, short on the road, long back into the back of the house area. And the tennis courts were right beside that part of our property. And Mr. Mason, John Mason, I think it was, superintendent of Frothingham Park. And he didn't like to have anybody on those tennis courts unless they were there and the park was open. And if the park wasn't open, you're not supposed to be in there. Well, I used to try to find out when he wasn't home, and I'd sneak over underneath the fence in his backyard. It was a hole like a dog would go through, and go and I'd play tennis. And I'd find out after I played with a friend, and actually the friend I used to play with was Fred Cole.
Oh, okay.
Lived in a house 2 houses from us on Bay Street.
Yep.
And he had a brother Don and a brother John. John actually bought our house on Day Street and lived there. I guess he still does.
John Coe.
John Cole, Jonathan.
Right.
And yeah, I used to love to go in and play tennis in there. And then when we were in high school, Rick and I were both on the high school tennis team. He played better than I did, but I tried hard.
Yeah, and Rick Crow, he was a year behind us.
Yes.
1961.
And he married a girl on the street, Sharon Beard.
Right. He did.
I'm remembering all these things.
I know, and she's class of 62, 1962.
Yeah.
And those classes, 61 and 62, they meet monthly in a local restaurant. And Carol DeCudo, who is a member of the 1961 class, she organizes it, and they call or they email her and tell her if they're coming or not. Now, on the 28th of this month, they're going to be at Doyle's in South Easton at 1 o'clock. So they do the luncheon. They don't do it at night anymore. So those two classes. So Sharon and Rick are always there, and other people that I know them all. So I have asked them if our class can join their monthly luncheon, and yes, with much joy, Carol DeCudo welcomed us. So we're going to be doing that, sending out information. So, and the first one is the end of this month, the 28th, I think, or the 22nd. 28th, I think. And it's at Doyle's Restaurant in Southeastern on Route 138.
Well, I gotta write that stuff down.
I know.
I might be interested in joining the group, because I haven't seen Rick for years.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, he's the same great guy he's always was, and Sharon is just as beautiful as she was. She was a model for many years, you know.
I had heard that.
Yeah. Anyway, tell me, what impact do you think Easton had on your adult life?
I guess I could probably say that, really thinking about it, I think I've grown up in a stable environment, a stable, friendly environment. And I think that all began right here in this town. And I don't recall ever having any issues with anybody, or my parents having any issues with anybody. It just, everybody seemed to get along and like each other, and enjoy life.
And accepted each other.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Now, I had Arlene and Johnson and Leela Melindy on the show before you, and Arlene talked about that, being a safe place, being a friendly place, and an accepting place. So yeah, yeah, and of course there were only 6,000 people here when you and I were growing up, and now there are 25,000.
Oh my.
So it's a different place.
Well, I don't.
But there are things that are still the same. People do care about each other. There's a lot of volunteers. People volunteer for things and support things. There's a lot of parents who are supporting their kids, whether it's in sports or academics or whatever. And you know, we enjoyed that too.
Yes. Or even the police. Yes. I can recall winter times when we got snow, which is more often then than now. But it would snow and there'd be no particular way to get the snow away from the road, at least in the beginning. And when I was living on Day Street, we had a really nice snowstorm, a lot of snow, and it wouldn't melt, and it was on the road. So I thought that, why don't we go sliding on the road with our sleds? So what Rick and I and a few other guys did, we went and we found some tree limbs. And we took these tree limbs and we put them at the top of the hill, almost right across from where his house is, at the top of that little hill at the bottom of Day Street, and across the bottom so nobody could come on from Center Street. And we'd slide on that hill. Well, people didn't like that. We were sliding down the hill and keeping them off the road. And so the police came, and they were very kind and told us that, well, don't run away, it's okay, come back and talk to us. So we came back sheepishly, talking to them, and they told us that we shouldn't have done that. There are other places to go. And I said, oh, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. And so we parted, and we removed the logs and tree limbs, and they went on their way, and it was over and done. Well, we never did it again.
Don't you feel back in those days, the police officers were substitute fathers in a way? You know, if they picked you up, and maybe you know, you had done something that wasn't so good, but they put you in the cop car and drive you home, and talk to the parents and say, you know, so he did this and that, but you know, he's a good boy, and I know that this isn't going to happen again, and that kind of thing. So, you know.
I never had any unkind, angry thoughts about police, any of them. And what I see now in our environment, in our cities and towns, is just so hard to believe that we could have gone to the point where we are now, with the situations that are happening, and it's just unbelievable. I'm just so glad I could have grown up and lived in this town. That's what I say, a stable environment. That was where I am.
Yeah, and that's true. And so we were free to grow and fulfill our potential, I think, without fear and with support, not just from parents, but from teachers and from our neighbors. So people were all very supporting, don't you think?
Yes. And I can remember, now they were talking about all these things are coming up. When I was on Day Street and the Cole family was two houses down, we used to have these plays, these little skits, and get together and we'd make things up and make it like it was play. And it was fun to do.
Yeah. How old were you?
I was probably 10 or 11. Maybe 12.
Yeah. So I'm sure that Sharon Baird was instrumental in getting people to do plays and things like that. She's very creative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, besides creating skits and plays and so forth, did you ever have any pickup games? And if so, what were they? Baseball, basketball, football? What were they?
Well, we do pickup games over in the Frothingham Park
Mm-hmm.
and baseball. And I did play on the junior varsity baseball team in high school when I was a freshman. And then I got into track and I did the long jump and the high jump. I wasn't a runner, I was a jumper.
Okay.
And I can't believe it now. I can remember and I did the Western roll. And there was another guy in my sister's class, Alan Bashan.
Oh, yes.
He was a high jumper, and he did a different kind of a flop. Not like one we see nowadays. This is crazy what they do now. But I did a Western roll, but I was able to high jump 6 feet, which I thought was pretty good.
Absolutely.
And then Jim Elson, 2 classes ahead of us. He'd go over the, he was about 6'8", big gentleman. And he'd come up to that and he'd do the scissors kick.
Yes.
You jump off one leg and go off it, lift up one leg, and then the other leg and go over. It's called the scissors.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't, but he's so tall, he could get his whole body up that high.
Yeah, my mother did the scissors too.
Did-
Yes, and she was, she jumped 5 feet, which was quite a bit for women in the late 20s. And she tried out for the Olympics in Boston. And she cleared the 5 feet, and then I think her thumb hit the bar. And it gave another woman an opportunity to go over again. And that woman did, and she went on to the Olympics instead of my mother.
Oh.
But when my mother passed away in 2000, I was living in New York. I came home, and there on the dining room table was this woman's obituary. And so they died at about the same time. My mother had cut out the obituary, and there it was on the dining room table.
Mm.
So, and people, so you might be a competitor with somebody, but you always were thoughtful, and sometimes you became good friends. So, a lot of respect for people's abilities and prowess, whether it was physical or mental, right? A lot of respect. Mm. So did you have any models that you, from Easton, that you modeled after? Were there teachers, were there coaches? Was there anybody that gave you inspiration?
Yes, yes. I can recall my math teacher.
Was that Mr. Simpson? Simpson?
No.
No.
Woman. Oh, golly, why am I not remembering? But she taught algebra and other math.
Oh, Catherine Healy.
Oh, Catherine Healy, Miss Healy.
Miss Healy.
She was extremely stern, and I got along very well with her, just fine, no issue. But when I used to have a problem with some math that I was working on, I would always go to a former classmate who unfortunately passed between our junior and senior year, and that was Charlie Peterson. He was such a good math student, better than I was, and I'll never forget how much I rather knew him as a friend that he could help me. But Miss Healy was a teacher that you had to understand her and agree with her that she was doing the best she could in the circumstances she had and taught in. But she was a very avid fan of the Boston Celtics basketball players. And at one point, I think it was when I was a junior in high school, she arranged somehow, maybe it was through Coach Val Moscato, but to have the Celtics basketball team come to our school and do a practice in our gym, a scrimmage. And she was responsible for doing that.
Oh my goodness.
She had seats behind the bench for Celtics games at Boston Garden. And I was so impressed when I found out she was a basketball fan. And she did that for our school and our community. It was just wonderful.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great memory.
And I kind of wish that I had come back and connected with some of my teachers, one of them, sooner at all. I would have loved to have gotten together with her again, because when I went on in my career, I ended up being a math teacher in my school, my junior high school at that time. Now it's a middle school, grades 7 and 8. I taught 7th grade math for 31 years in my school in Ledyard, Connecticut. And if I'd gone back and shared with Miss Healy that I was doing that, I'd probably go, "You did?" I can just see her now. I would have loved to have seen that expression on her face. I'm sure she would have reacted that way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that is a great story. And to think that you graduated in your prowess and your abilities in math. I mean, so she might have given you the confidence too. And certainly Charlie Peterson's help was a good source for you too.
Well, you had to take it seriously for her.
Right.
If you didn't, you'd be on her bad side.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to be on Miss Healy's bad side. So I was the model student, did all my homework with Charlie's help sometimes.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that was so sad when he died. He was in a car accident on Easter weekend. He had just been coming back from Easter midnight mass, I think, at his church. And then I believe that he had ball tires and skidded in the snow. Wasn't it? Oh no, it was Easter. Sorry, Easter. And so he was our class president, and he was not there for our senior year. Oh.
No, but that said, Paul Kelly, who was vice president, took over leading the class.
Yes, and did a fine job.
And under the circumstances, the class decided not to have another president, but just to have Paul take over. And I think that was the proper way to handle that situation.
Yeah. And our yearbook, a year later, after he died, was in memory of Charlie Peterson. Yeah. So, yeah, and here we've lived 63 years or 64 years more than Charlie did. And I know we're all grateful for the longevity, but we pause and think about those who didn't live as long. Jackie Wild, he died a year later in a car accident.
I didn't know the circumstances.
Yes, and it happened to be Easter weekend also. So, yeah. Anyway, it's been wonderful, Stanton Clark, to have you here and talking about, the one thing you didn't talk about was DeMolay. I was in Rainbow, you were in DeMolay in Brockton, and I was in the Brockton Assembly number 20, and we're the advisor. And so we both went through that. And I think that was a wonderful experience. It gave us poise, gave us the ability to speak well, and we had to do all that memorization. So it certainly stimulated our brain cells, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And unfortunately, my situation, when I went through the chairs, junior counselor, senior counselor, then master counselor, the 6-month off-office terms of office, and my term when I was master counselor was from the middle of spring to the following, after my graduation from high school, fall. So I carried a tremendous amount of baggage, good baggage, with me, serving as in that with that DeMolay organization, and got a lot of poise and self-confidence from that. if I had stayed around town and been asked to join the Masons, I would have.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like a junior Masonic organization, but it's not really, but it's similar. Then when you're 16, 17, you go off, you leave.
Mm.
And I went off to college and didn't study very hard and couldn't go back because of all the time I spent with the DMLA and really enjoyed it, got a lot from it. And what am I going to do now? Well, I joined the Navy. And wouldn't you know, I scored high in math, high enough so they thought I should go. Well, I wanted to go join the Navy because I figure if I'm going to go to school, I'm going to be forced to pay attention and study, or they'll put me in jail. And I didn't want to go to jail, but I wanted to go to school. So I joined the Navy, and I wanted to go to submarine school, be in submarines, because if I went into submarines, that's under the ocean. If you go into surface craft, you're above the ocean, and the boats go back and forth, and you get seasick. I would get violently seasick. Go into the ocean, once you're down 60 feet, you hardly move. There is no rough sea. It's nice and smooth. So anyway, I ended up going to nuclear power school and going into submarines and was a nuclear reactor operator on an FBM submarine. And that was something I think back on and I said, what? I did what?
And
But that's all part of it.
And certainly your time growing up in Easton prepared you for all of that. And we're also grateful for that. And 31 years as a math teacher, you really...
With 12-year-olds.
Yes, and you really...
That's tough.
Yeah, well, before I went to law school, I spent 10 years teaching 12 and 13-year-olds too. So I know exactly what you mean, but they have so many creative, exuberant ideas. I just loved every one of them. And I got voted, what was it I got voted? Most popular or most...
Congenial?
Yeah, maybe that was it. I don't know. But, and my class gave me a female version of Rodin's The Thinker, which I still have today, because they said, you taught us how to think. I said, well, yeah, that's the idea. Stanton, thank you so much for being my guest today on Growing Up in Easton. Thank you for recalling all the wonderful memories of being independent, self-sufficient, happy, and in a stable community where people cared about each other. So thank you for joining me today, and all the very best.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
It sure is. And those of you watching, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this segment of Growing Up in Easton as much as Stanton and I have enjoyed providing it to you. Until next time, be well.